The following presentation is brought to you live from Dallas, Texas, for the International Association of Square Dance Callers 26th Annual Convention. This is tape 20. Hook 'em. Dancing is learning.
All right, if you guys would like to get a comfortable seat. Cindy, you're going to handle the cordless mic for us, right? Okay. I'll give it to you after I finish with it. Welcome. This is another one of our Find 'em, Hook 'em, and Keep 'em panels. This panel is called Dancing is Learning. My name is Tony Oxendine. I'm your helpful moderator. And I am staffed by two of the finest minds in the business. On my right, from Herndon, Virginia. Pretty good. Danny DeVito. Mr. Mike Jacobs. And on my left, from Salisbury, Texas. Is it Salisbury? Silsby. I thought it was Salisbury. I was so confused with Milton last night. Anyway, it's a suburb. Apparently, it's a suburb of Houston. That's best I can understand it. Or maybe Houston's a suburb of, I don't know. Mr. Wayne Morvent. The way we're going to do things, we will have the panel do a presentation for you. Then we're going to open it up for questions. We have a cordless mic, so please, when you have a question, we'll have our lovely assistant, Cindy Hawley, will be handling the cordless mic. Wait until you get the cordless mic to ask your question so that we can get the entire question on the tape, because this panel will be taped. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Mike Jacobs.
You want to use yours or this guy? I'll use this. Okay.
Thank you, Tony.
I have a handout here. I would like to go ahead and get somebody to start passing along here. If you have been at last year's session on learning styles, you'll be familiar with some of the material that I've used here. As certainly this handout was part of it. It's really important to realize that we as teachers of square dancing are not unique. It's a learning situation, it's a teaching situation, and therefore books that talk about how to teach and how people learn apply across the board. Now, the subject area may be different than what it initially talks about in a teacher's textbook on teaching history, but the principles remain the same. And how people learn is extremely important in applying yourself on how to teach. There are teaching styles, there are learning styles, there are thinking styles, analytical styles, and all of them have effect upon how the dancer learns. In every dance group, there are people that you are supposedly teaching, but they're no effort to teach. They're ahead of the game. Many times they even come up to you with a question that is is your next subject area on the teach. So they're able to analyze and effectively learn. They're successful learners. They have taken their learning style and adapted it to any situation, and they know how to learn. Well, those people you don't need to teach. They would have learned without you. It is in a middle group of people that need introduction information where you effectively try to teach them, and you're successful in teaching them. You straighten out their problems, you refine their techniques a little bit, and you get a successful dancer out of it. And then there's those people that we think, they're stupid. They don't learn that for you to explain square through 27 times to them, and 28 times in a row they do it wrong. Therefore, you have labeled in their mind that they're stupid. And they're bad dancers, and we should throw them out of dancing. There's no such thing as a stupid student. There is such a thing as a stupid teacher. And that's the format that we follow, in that we are stupid as teachers in not trying to find a way to communicate with that student. Part of the way of learning to communicate with the student is learning where they come from and realizing that there are different learning styles. You most effectively teach the person that is of the same learning style that you are. Now, what are learning styles? Learning styles fall into three categories. That is, whether you're an auditory learner, your primary way of learning, gathering information, is through hearing things, absorbing information that way. There are tactile learners, the kinesthetic. You learn by touch, feel, atmosphere. That sounds very strange. How many of you have children that can't read or study unless the TV's blaring, unless the radio is going on, and so forth? Do you have any children that have learned that way, that you keep yelling at, saying, turn the TV down, you can't possibly read or study that way? Those are tactile learners. They need an environment in which to learn and associate things with each other. They can learn that way. The fact that you don't learn that way doesn't mean they can't. And tactile learners learn in a whole different set of experiences. They need to be told that when they're the point of a diamond, they should point their hand into the center so they can tell themselves their points. They need that physicality to know what they are and who they are. They simply can't recognize by where they're standing or you yelling over a microphone what to do. They need a tactile sense to gather information. The final learning style is visual. And these are all learning styles. It's how you learn. It's not necessarily how you express yourself, how you think, or how you analyze. Those are all different kinds of things. This is simply how they absorb the information. So if you have a group of people, usually a large group, a large demographic in front of you has equal representation of all three groups. Each of those three groups can be modified by a secondary learning style that affects the primary. So if somebody's primary learning style is visual, they can have a second learning style that's auditory, which means then usually the third learning style is non-existent as far as they're concerned. If you have a dancer that's primarily visual, his secondary learning style is tactile, kinesthetic, the environment is what affects him, then yelling at him over a microphone 27 times will not get through. It doesn't matter how much louder you yell it, it won't work. You ever seen people that are working with somebody from another language, and so they figure that in order to make them understand, they simply yell the English louder? And that's the effect on that person. We may speak the same language, but we're not absorbing it in the same way. So your informational output has to take into consideration all the learning styles and their effects and combinations upon the people. A successful learner, you can't tell the learning style of, because he knows how to adapt his learning style to the situation. It is the unsuccessful learner that doesn't know how to adapt his learning style to the scenario. So that means then the person that cannot function square through correctly off of your explanation is not handicapped. He has a different approach to the situation, and if you're going to teach that person, you need to take that different approach. Last year, Jerry Junk and I did this learning style session, and on many of Jerry's explanations, it was not just simply square through is this, this, and this, or this is how square through looks and this is where it ends, but he would say, but you're facing this wall, or you're looking at the chandelier when you're done, or he used the physicality of the room. That's what appeals to the tactile learner. So it is using a combination of all these effects that you can most effectively teach everybody in your group. A large group of people will have an even balance of the people in there. But as we face the scenario of having smaller and smaller lesson groups, then we have to learn what the learning styles of the people there are. If we have a square of people and some of them are auditory learners and one is a visual learner, that visual learner will not pick up the same way that the auditory learners did. So you'll have to find ways to adapt to him. He is not slow. He is not stupid. He is not handicapped. He learns differently. And we need to approach square dancing to adapt to different people taking our activity and not just everything out of the same cookie cutter. You know, when we look at a lot of the dancing process, we really call for the auditory learner. That our most successful people early in our lessons learn primarily being told where to go, what to do. We even accentuate that more by cueing calls, and as we get into more difficult situations or expand ideas, it's dependent upon us cueing and giving a little bit more information. So we really call for the auditory person. But then we get to advanced and challenge where there's formations and there's ideas and concepts to apply, and suddenly all those auditory learners are right down the toilet. Because suddenly what we're doing doesn't appeal to the process we really praised them for initially. Suddenly we got spots they've got to see. There are diamond formations they've got to see these things and relate. And we start talking to them in terms of those formations, in terms of those visual things or ideas and tactile situations we got to apply. And suddenly we get a whole segment of dancers that aren't very good at advanced or challenge, or even plus if we demand them to be very positional. It's not because the people are stupid. It's not because they're bad dancers. It's because we have trained them one way, and now we've reversed the whole process by which they need to be able to learn and function. So no wonder people have trouble with positioning. It automatically calls for something completely different than what we initially started the process with. If we learn at the very beginning to teach people across the board, being able to help into any of their strengths and learning styles, then eventually we'll find that we'll be successful teachers across the board, whether you're teaching basic, whether you're teaching plus, whether you're teaching advanced or challenge. You can end up with successful dancers by showing them how to be successful, how to solve the problem, how to play the game. But unless you find different ways of experiencing that, it's not going to help. You'll notice that I did a whole verbal demonstration here. For those of you who learn primarily by auditory technique, you've been following along pretty well. But if your segment of your learning is really towards the visual, then what I'm saying here is being reinforced by the fact you're looking down at that sheet of paper, maybe following along. For the tactile learner, the fact that I'm out here moving around, doing different things, gives that tactile learner an environment in which to learn. So I'm coming at it from 3 different avenues. And that's the type of presentation you need to do with any of your type of teaching, is that you need to find spatial relationships and so forth for the tactile learner. You need to find visual clues to help the visual learner. And you need to find the right words to appeal to the auditory learner. Sometimes they cross purposes. Auditorily, I can make a graphic description of something and have it come across to the tactile learner. For instance, the caller that taught me to call, when he initially would talk about California Twirl, or rather dive through, that when he got to the California Twirl session of dive through, he talked about the man cranking the lady under. It was a good verbal picture that was developed by his words. It gave a picture to the tactile learner to be able to function. So it doesn't mean that you have to run around the room in order to teach. It doesn't mean that you've got to paint pictures on the floor in order to teach. But there are ways to try to do things visually, tactily, and auditorily so that you can cover everybody in your group. This is their learning style. How they express themselves does not necessarily give a clue on what their learning style is. Somebody that's very, very vocal may not necessarily be an auditory learner. It means that their style of expression is auditory. It means that you have to examine how they talk, how they function, how they learn to come up with their learning style. Then you can best appeal to it in the process. I, for instance, had a lady, excuse me. I don't think I should have stopped there. I had a lady in lessons that confused. Just got up, huh? Welcome back, Tony. I had a lady in lessons that confused 2 calls that the names were not similar, the actions were not similar, the starting formations were not similar. There was no reason for her to confuse the 2 calls. Now, another dancer standing beside her, who very quickly understand calls and formations and so forth, and he started to smirk about her. I had to stop him first. And secondly, started to have her describe the action and why she was confused, and realized that at one critical juncture in the 2 calls, the action was similar. And at that point in time, she folded into the other call. And because she was a tactile learner, and since her body movement was this way, instead of continuing around the outside, she went right down the middle, confusing one call for another. She was following a logical process in her mind. She wasn't stupid. And then I had to take that dancer aside and show where the other dancer, the one that thought she was stupid, and show where her confusion occurred and why it occurred and why it was a logical decision. And so in the process, I not only helped her to be able to learn the situation by understanding her problem, but secondly, I helped make the dancing environment easier because I also defended her in the eyes of their fellow dancer. I think that's the care and consideration that we have to use in teaching. If we are going to establish a square dance ecology movement where we conserve the people we got, instead of letting them go by the wayside because they don't fit into our convenient pattern of teaching, then we can really truly save the dancing world and the dancing population by taking care of the people we have gotten in the door. Jim Hensley did a beautiful job yesterday telling us and delineating our problem about getting people in the door, but we also have to keep them once they get in that doorway. The only effective way of keeping them once they get in the doorway is by effectively teaching. And unless we use those ideas in order to teach and effectively get our ideas across, we'll continue to fail because they'll never make it through the door back out to the dance levels that we see. If anywhere along the line we fall down on the job of teaching, what we do is we make unsuccessful dancers that don't have a good time. And ultimately, everyone is judged by their fellow dancer on how well they dance out on the floor. They may be fun people and so forth, but they dread dancing in a square with them. And when they become social pariahs, they eventually get the message and drop out, and we lose people that way. It's not to make them choreographers. That's not the objective. It's to make them feel comfortable with the square dance language. And the only way to get that across is by learning how they learn. And the only way you're going to do that is through, first, observation, and secondly, communicating with that dancer. Don't be afraid to talk to the unsuccessful dancer. Not finding out why on their end they don't understand what's going on. It's listening to what their impression of things are. Once you get an idea of, have you ever had a dancer say, well, just tell me where to go? Where do I end up? How does this feel when I get over there? Those are three different questions and examples of three different learning styles. You can watch unsuccessful dancers actually watch their hand into the handhold. It's an indication of a visual dancer. They have to see it moving in. They're not looking for the spot on the floor. They're actually looking to engage the hand. There are other people that you see perform relay the deucey, and so they swing out to the outside here, and now they start the long parade, and they get down about halfway here, and they start to hesitate, and they start seeing or getting a feel for where they're at, and they go back on. They finally move up to the end of the wave, but they have to get their bearings in the middle of doing the call. You watch dancers in relay the deucey, or they talk about it, for instance, afterwards, and they just go, well, I go until I run out of hands. I go until it feels good. There's nothing wrong with that. We have gotten this definition mentality where they all have to be mini choreographer callers to be able to be true square dancers. No, that's not the definition of a true believer. What it really needs to be done is that we need to legitimize their feelings of how they successfully get through calls. That the person that does not memorize every portion of the call is still a successful square dancer. That a person that dances by feel to get to the spot is still a successful square dancer. That the person that cannot spit the definition back to you is still a successful square dancer. And unless we create those environments, we're going to be continually running up against failure. We're going to only end up keeping the choreographic nerd. And that, unfortunately, is what is occurring in square dancing as we constantly go towards the puzzle and not toward the dance enjoyment. One final set of things here, because part of what I'm going to be doing is going to be affecting the other two callers as they go through examples. I have 4 books here. That are accessible in any bookstore. Some of them are in the libraries now, too, as well. 2 of the books I used last year are, first, The Way They Learn. It's by Cynthia Ulrich-Tobias. This is a very good book. It's very readable. It talks about the learning styles, teaching styles, thinking styles, and shows you examples and ways of thinking and doing things. And I'll have the books up here after the session and whatever to look at. The second one I used last year is called Effective Teaching, Effective Learning, and it's by Alice M. Fairhurst and Lisa L. Fairhurst. This is a little more technical-minded and it's a little harder reading. The book that I interestingly picked up this year that I thought would not have very much bearing, and as I read it, I realized it had all the bearing in the world, is a book called How to Talk So Kids Can Learn. And what this gentleman should do is change the title to How to Talk So Everybody Can Learn. Because what I have found is that the paragraphs that he says are coming from kids has come from every square dancer that I've ever taught. And you hear complaints of the children about why they can't learn something, and it's the complaints that square dancers utter to you of why they can't learn something, and these scenarios are talked about here and how to effectively deal with it so that that person is encouraged to learn, not depressed to learn. I think it's a great book to really think about getting into. It's once again called How to Talk So Kids Can Learn by Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish. And finally, there's a book by Robert J. Sternberg called Thinking Styles. And it's very good in delineating how people think of different types and classifications of thinking. You can start to see how you're different than somebody else's thinking style. Everything is legitimate. One of the things that was really good in this book was it talked about 3 examples of 3 very successful people that were totally different thinking styles and approaches to things. They all ended up with 7-figure incomes. So obviously, by any judgment standard, they were successful. So, but they got there 3 different ways, which means that no particular way is the most valid way. It's just simply your way. And that's the way to view learning styles, is that none of them are more legitimate than anyone else. They are just simply a different learning style. And unless we learn to deal with any of those 3 learning styles, we're going to leave them in dust and lose the dancer. Thank you.
And now Wayne Morvent.
Thank you, Tony. Mike? Yes, that was excellent. I do appreciate that came before. That's the way in. Reading through this as this was tasked to me, it's how to hook these folks. The first thing that came to my mind is we're talking about the newer dancers. We found them now. How do I get them to come back every week? How do I get them to come back the second week, the third week? I want to get them interested in this activity. Get them to decide that next Thursday night I want to go square dancing rather than going bowling. Okay. What is the biggest reason when you have newer dancers come into the activity? And I'm going to go into this in a minute. I'm not talking about classes or students because I don't use those words anymore. Okay. These are newer square dancers. Why do they not continue to come back? What's the biggest reason? They come 3 times, they don't come back. They come 5 times, they don't come back. They're not enjoying themselves. There's some reason why they want to go somewhere else rather than come here to the square dance. There is something going on that they're not enjoying themselves as much as we could be helping them to enjoy themselves. They're going somewhere else rather than going to their square dance. And we need to find a way to get them to want to come back to the square dance next week. I find only 2 things are important with newer dancers on our dance night, and that is that they have a good time and that they look forward to coming back next week. Those are the only things that are important. And if I teach them a new movement during this session, then that's good. But if I spend the entire session just square dancing, that is also good. That puts some real limits on things that happen. When are we going to graduate? I have no idea, and I'm not particularly concerned at this time. Okay? Mike talked about caller things in my mind. We're in a learning situation and a teaching situation. These are caller things. As far as I'm concerned, these new folks coming into my building are in a dancing situation. That's what they're in. My task is to be in a teaching situation in a dancing situation. I need to teach them while they are dancing. I need to have a square dance every night. I don't have classes. I have a square dance. Okay. We need to get those folks there, and we need to make them immediately comfortable with where they're at. These folks come in here, they don't know other folks unless their friends have brought them there. We need to have somebody at the door to greet them. They're going to come up to this door and go inside. There's a dance going on, and he is there because she asked him to come, and he doesn't like dancing anyway, and he's going to go into a room full of dancing, and he is not comfortable at all. We need somebody on the outside of that door welcoming these people, a friendly face. Bring them inside with someone that they know. Make them comfortable right from the very start. I have a square dance on the very first night. Many of us, I know I have throughout all the time I've been teaching, we have 3 open nights. I do not put on a flyer anymore. This is 3 free square dance lessons. I don't put anything on my flyer about square dance lessons. This is an open party night. And in my particular case, we do a little bit of line dancing, we do a little bit of round dancing, we do a little bit of square dancing. This is a country and western square dance fun party. I know some other folks that have used this type advertisement and have got tremendous results. I'm getting results with it. I'm getting 3 and 4 squares of brand new folks out to the square dance. I see Andy Petreri sitting right over here. I know he got 14 squares in using the same thing. We're not talking about a free square dance lessons. We're talking about come out to a party. Then I have the task of teaching in the dancing situation. They're coming out to dance and have a good time, a good social activity with their friends. This is working very well for me. I believe if these folks come in and I can show them, I'm going to start with saying 12 movements. And I start out similar to a one-night stand. I want them dancing and just having a good time. I'm not trying to particularly teach them anything that I want them to retain. I want them to enjoy the activity for tonight. Okay. And if I can show them 12 movements quickly, and these are easy movements. Circle left is one. U-turn back is one. This is very, very easy. I can give them a top quality square dance with those 12 movements, and I can do most anything you can do with all of your movements if you be creative about the way that you go about these things. But I must give them a square dance. In doing this, to hook them, you've got to make them feel comfortable with your club members. And in doing that, with what has happened in many areas throughout the activity, the club members no longer want to go back and go through classes again. So I've got to get the club members to be interested in this hour and a half. I want them to want to be out on the floor as well. If you make the decision to have club members in your classes, okay, angels, if you will. There are some that do not want angels out in their class at all. Okay. But you need to make your club members feel as comfortable out here having a good time, having fun with these newer dancers. And so you've got to be very creative about what you're going to do. You need to know what you're doing. You need to know how to handle these people to give them a good time. I do as much teaching as possible while they're dancing. Very, very little time standing here and let me explain and read a definition and tell you how to do this movement. Again, I'm trying to hook these people in. I'll move farther into after they're into a square dance class, but this is where I viewed this when it talked about hooking them. Okay? I can get the newer dancers through a tremendous amount more of choreography than I can the experienced dancers because they have not picked up bad habits. I can get them through things that I can't get my club members through. There used to be a singing call called Dee-Di-Do, and this is way, way back. Probably nobody but Milton Luttrell and I know this anymore. He's asleep. He didn't even hear that. It had a nice figure in it, and I would use the figure straight off of the singing call at about the third week of square dance lessons as we had them then. And I would tell the folks, by graduation night, you'll no longer be able to do this. And it was a fact, because it had things like swing by the right, and as soon as I said swing, they had done a swing through. It's finished, you know. So you need to be very creative in using words and do things very directionally to make good creative choreography for these new dancers that they can do. Okay, they don't have the bad habits. They will listen to you early on. Okay, I start out with simple things, the things that are important to me. And again, this is prior to a class. This is getting them interested in taking square dance lessons. A courtesy turn is extremely valuable tool to me, because I can do right and left throughs. I can do all kinds of things if they know how to do a courtesy turn. Or I can accomplish those things without calling them. I hope you understand what I mean there. Okay? Circle left. Understand that choreography that you feel is very, very simple is tremendously complicated to the guy that's out there for the first night. Okay. If I can get them to understand who the heads are and go forward and play patty cake and back up where you came from, and that's forward and back, I can use that the rest of the night. If I can call heads pass through, just pass by right shoulder to right shoulder, turn around, that's a U-turn back. Again, I'm not concerned with being technical at this point. Pass through, it's extremely important to me that they know where their partner is. Their partner is the person beside them, not the person in front of them. Okay? Face your partner. Now, where is your partner? And they will immediately grab hands with the one in front of them. because that was the person they started dancing with. I have to explain to them the square dance term, your partner is the person beside you. So if I have the heads pass through and do a U-turn back and pass through and face your partner and pass through, I got boys facing boys and girls facing girls. Can I use circle half here? Certainly. Boys circle half, pass through, outsides do a U-turn back, centers pass through. 4 of you join hands, circle half. This is tremendous choreography for a first night dancer. But we have done nothing here. We've done nothing here. Right? But this is tremendous choreography for the newer dancers. But you know what it takes? It takes the caller knowing what he's doing, making good use of the choreography he has available to him with 3 to 5 movements. Because I must give them a square dance with a number of movements that they know. And hopefully they will know one more for next week. Okay? The movements that I use, face your partner, face toward the center, face in, face out. Hold hands with your partner. A thing that I have started using in the last couple of years because I stole it from Randy Dougherty. It's a tremendous tool. Be at the ready. Those who are not active, the actives have no place to go except with each other or coming to you. You be ready to do a movement when they get there. Be ready before they get there, because I'm going to tell them to do something with you before they ever get there. So you be prepared, be ready to do the movement. They stand out there talking with one another, have no realization that these active couples are coming out to them. Okay? They need to be involved in the dance, although they are not the active couple. Okay? You turn back, forward and back, Alaman left, right and left, grand, pass-throughs. I go into a bend the line very early because I can do that. Okay? A dive through, probably on the second night, promenades and ladies' chains. And I can present a tremendous square dance with these 12 movements. And so can you. A tremendous amount of choreography is available to you there. You can do square throughs. You can do chain across. You can do flutter wheels. I mean, you can accomplish these. Right? You can accomplish right and left throughs because you have these simple tools. Pass through and a courtesy turn. Face the outside couple. Heads pass through, face your partner. Pass through, you're facing the outside couple. Circle half, pass through, outside's courtesy turn. Centers pass through. Pass through, face your partner. Lines of 4, go forward and back. We're giving these folks a square dance. And I am finding also, you know who else I'm giving a challenging square dance? My club members. My club members are now getting a challenging square dance. It's making them this early time, this hour and a half before the club dances, it's making this time desirable to them as well. Hey, this is kind of fun. This is not the same thing that we do all the time. Okay? Basics are very, very interesting, very good. You need to learn to be a very good directional caller, how to talk to people, to get them to understand what you want them to do. I have a philosophy that I might be kicked for, and that's okay if I am. I'm trying not to be technical because I get accused of being that sometimes. Anything that you can get them to understand what you want them to do, they do it and they are successful. It's legal at that point. Okay? They had a good time and they got through what you were trying to do. That's legal stuff. We're just providing a square dance for these people. Okay? You need to build the dancer's confidence. Okay, the louder you holler in English does not do a thing for them. You need to build their confidence. You need to let them know that they're doing good. I do certain things that work well for me. I get them to recognize their corner and I say, that's Smiley. And then I move them till they're totally lost and I say, where's Smiley? And she's standing right in front of them. They all holler. And they are building confidence. They're having fun and they're doing things and they feel like they have accomplished something. You need to seek a point of being different without being difficult. And if you find it, please let me know where it's at. Okay? That is a very, very hard place to find. But you need to find a way of doing things differently without being difficult. Okay? We've got them in the door. We've got them there for their first 3 nights or so. Some of the things that Mike talked about was the use of different formations, different arrangements. Okay, we're doing this if we make very good use of simple basics. When I have the boys circle half, boys pass through, girls face the boys face the girls, lines go forward and back. I'm using different uses of arrangements. Get them to see that the boys will sometimes be next to each other. The girls will sometimes be next to each other. Lines pass through. Boys face toward the girls face to the boys. Everybody pass through. We've accomplished a double pass through. Leaders, outsides, do a U-turn back. We can function with these type setups if we understand. The only problem we'll get into is half sachets, but who's going to do a U-turn back? That will fix that for you, okay? Circle half pass through, and those that are half sachet do a U-turn back. We can work with this kind of stuff if we have done our homework, but we must do our homework. Can we get in trouble with this? I don't think so, because the thing I heard from Tony Oxendine on last year's session that I don't think anyone heard but me in the entire thing. He said, I'll never get in trouble on a program that's important to me because I'm not going to do anything to get me in trouble. What did he say? What did he say? He said, I'm going to walk up there knowing what I'm doing, and that's what I'm going to do. This is what we must know. We must know what we're doing. This is all done in homework, folks. This is done at home. Our total task is to entertain these people for tonight and make them want to go square dancing more than they want to go to the bar or they want to go bowling. Make them want to come back next week. We need to understand what is difficult and what is not difficult from a dancer perspective. It's hard for me to have a dancer perspective anymore. I've been calling quite a long time, and I call 5 nights every week. I seldom get a chance to dance, and I've quite a bit lost the dancer perspective. We need to try to regain that. What is difficult for the dancers and what is not difficult for the dancers? It may not be the same thing in our minds. A cast-off 3/4 from boys together, girls together, lines facing out, that's obviously not difficult. That's where we get when we pass through wheel and deal double pass through. Put centers in, cast off 3/4. That's easy enough, isn't it? Just call lines, go forward and back, pass through and cast off 3/4 and see if that's as easy as it seems like it is. It will not work. It'll blow the whole floor. Okay? So you need to understand, because they do it from there, the fact that they got there from somewhere else is what made it easy for them. It wasn't the fact that it was easy from there. Lines of 4 facing out, cast off 3/4 is not an easy thing if it does not come after a center's in. We do things moving into experienced dancers. We can do things centers and ends that make things different but make them look good for the dancers if we understand good use of arrangements and formations. Okay, if I want the centers to pass the oceans and the ends to slide through and extend to a nice normal wave, what do I have to do? I have to know how to put the boys together on one end, the girls together on the other end, so that the centers will not be half sashayed when they pass the ocean, so they'll know how to get there. The ends will not be half sashayed, so the slide through will put them facing in, and then we can extend. Am I going on the technical again? I got get off of that.
That mental image is scary, ain't it?
But we have to know how to put the boys together on the left end and the girls on the right end so we can have centers pass the ocean and they be able to accomplish that. Because if we do it from a normal in-facing line, then the center couples trying to pass the ocean are half sashayed. And the probability of dancer success has dropped way, way down. These are the things that we must understand and think about so that we make their success rate high and they can enjoy this activity. We can build their confidence. Use of movements, and this is what our program guide said, how we use movements continually on. Think about your movements a little more in depth. I can get brand new dancers that know how to do a slide through. I can get them to have heads pass through, face your partner, pass through with the outsides, pass through, face your partner. I got nice lines. Pass through, bend the line. Okay? Ladies chain across, keep them with a partner. Pass through, who are the heads? Or courtesy turn. Now I got lines facing in. Who are the heads? They'll tell me. Heads arch, dive through. All bend the line. This is tremendous choreography. Is it legal choreography? Absolutely. Always has been. But we need to know that. We need to read our definitions. You know, it says dive through, the center couple make the arch, or the directed couple. This is good choreography to use, and it's making good use of the movements we already have available. Things that are very, very difficult, runs. Everybody can do a run. Boys run, girls run. Cause heads, you turn back and run. I assure that is immensely difficult. Immensely difficult. Because they will end up, if we call heads turn through, heads run, sides slide through, where are we at? We're in lines of 4 facing in, folks. Because of what the run actually does for you. So we can't say that runs are easy movements. They are not easy movements. They're extremely difficult movements if we don't use them properly and give good key words. Use them from places that the dancers understand what we want to do. And yet, a run, heads run once and a half, or boys run once and a half, is extremely easy. If I will put all 4 boys in the middle in a double pass-through situation, and boys touch a quarter, boys walk and dodge. Boys run once and a half around the girls. You're now in between them, lines of 4 go forward and back. That was easy because I was able to talk to them. But if I just call heads turn through and run, there is nobody going to be able to do that, or I've never found anyone that could do that. Okay? We need to make the newer dancers very, very comfortable. We need to understand that we are teaching in a dancing environment. We want them dancing. We don't want them out here walking. I don't like the use of class anymore, or particularly don't like students. They are all square dancers the day that they come in the door. If the lack of knowledge of numbers of movements makes them students, then I'm certainly a student. You know, been dancing since I think 1954. But I don't know the sea level. Yeah, but you're old. Oh, no, I'm old. I'm old. We need to learn what we're doing. We need to learn how to make use of our movements. We need to think of the feelings of these new folks coming into our activity, make them comfortable there, make that square dance the place that they want to go next Tuesday night rather than all of the other choices that they have. Okay? And if you learn a bunch of teaching theory, that will fill in all of those pockets and make you do your job well. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. Okay, heads turn through and run. Where are you?
Why do I care?
I think Mike's got a couple of additional comments.
Now, let's turn theory to practicality, okay? You've all just heard a session done by Wayne here, all right? Now, Betsy, I was taking you first. Remember, I talked about learning styles earlier. What learning style do you consider yourself to be?
Mainly, I consider myself to be an audio learner.
And you're not really. I was observing everybody during Wayne's lecture, and some of the physicalities is that in order to be able to effectively listen, you were also working on the needlepoint here. It's not you found his information boring or anything else, but you needed a tactile situation to best absorb it. So it may be that you're primarily tactile and auditory secondary as a modifier. And so that's one thing to consider, is that you need an environment to be able to work off of. Gene Record. There were many times during Wayne's session here that you were looking up and down. Up and down looking is a sign of an auditory learner because he has to shut out other environments to be able to absorb information. It's a sign that an auditory person is absorbing information. How do you feel your learning style is? Very much auditory. Gene Triplett. Gene Triplett is the past chairman of the NEC, the Charlotte Convention, and is the representative of the NEC to come here. Gene is not a square dance scholar. During all the material that Wayne was using, where he was going through square dance choreography, Gene was looking upright. An upright look is accessing the analytical powers of a right-handed person. Are you right-handed, Gene? And if they look up left, they're accessing memorized material. So, for instance, if I asked Gene what the capital of New York was, is that if he had to not have that readily, he would look up left to access the memorized information, if he ever memorized that. Did you? Or was it a long time ago? And so when he's attempting to follow something in a new way, which causes upon his powers to analyze, he'll look upright. his memorized material is up left. And it's just the opposite for a tactile learner. He'll look the other directions. If they are left-handed, everything is exactly opposite of what I just said. And so there are physical clues, if you take the time to talk and work with the people in front of you, that you can learn their learning style. Everybody in here is a pretty successful learner. They at least got through square dancing to this point. And they've probably gotten through a lot of other things successfully, so they are successful learners.
This ends the front side of your cassette.
Help the unsuccessful learner. Both Mike Turner down here and this gentleman over here took notes, but they took notes differently. Your notes were very detailed, unless you were writing a letter at home, right? And it was very much an entire, what am I looking for? Well, he was doing his best as possible to record all the information that was coming across verbally. The gentleman is correct in saying visual primarily because he had to do a word-by-word detailed copying of what Wayne was saying in order for his stuff to be effective for him later on. Mike, though, would listen to entire passages of Wayne before he came down and jotted down a little note. It was a key word. So do you feel you're more auditory than visual or tactile? Both. Yeah, you can actually be like 40-40-20 or something on that line. You'll find that there'll be one segment of learning style that will be atrophied. It will not be a really good one. What is also of interest is that anybody that's been abused later on in their lives, in other words, past 2 or 3 years, will lose the learning style of that abuse. In other words, if they've been verbally abused, they will not be an auditory learner. If they had gotten to the point where they were in their 20s and suddenly became verbally abused, and that was their primary learning style, you will find a totally unsuccessful learner because you shut off their learning style and they've never really learned any other. They really have become handicapped. Melton, I know you've been listening because I've seen you in board meetings in the same manner and you've heard every word. Melton has to shut off the outside world to be able to concentrate on the auditory aspect, and you're primarily an auditory learner. Exactly. So looking at him, you think he's disinterested. It is his way of absorbing information. Jerry, I have an interesting question for you. What style do you consider yourself to be?
Well, I do write things down, so I must be tactile. But I listen very closely, so I guess I'm auditory.
I think you're right the first time with tactile. You used your eyes to watch Wayne's presentation. Anytime you were absorbing information, you watched his speech, his mannerism. You didn't just simply concentrate on the words. You watched the mechanisms going on, but you weren't looking for visual clues as you were doing it. You weren't writing. You were pretty much concentrating on how he was delivering and what he was doing. When Chuck asked you something, that shut down and you went away from that process. And it's interesting to watch that somebody like this in a tactical situation that needs to concentrate on the person that's teaching can be distracted by somebody else around there. That person that distracted in that one key moment made that person unable to learn the particular call. If their corner starts talking a conversation with something, they're totally distracted from learning. There's others where that would be part of the learning environment and they learned effectively because of that. You can't just look at a situation and think that applies every time. You got to understand the person, where they're coming from, try to figure out the percentage value they absorb, and then you can talk to them and then you can teach them. And this is an example of how it works.
All right, thank you, Mike. You know, one of the very nice things of CALLERLAB and the conventions is you get to hear this type of knowledge. It's awesome for me. Got a question for you. I'm going to read you something, and I want you to tell me what it is. If I were to tell you to inhibit your hands to the male bovine by the cranial outgrowths. Absolutely. What about do not undividedly allocate your ova into a single woven container? An inquiring mind eradicated the small domesticated carnivore. Absolutely. In the event that existence bestows upon you yellowish acid fruit of the subtropical citrus tree, manufacture a citrus-based beverage.
gives you lemons, make lemonade.
Pulchritude is situated at the orb of the percipient.
That sounds erotic.
Absolutely. My point. Which one of these are you going to remember the easiest? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, or pulchritude is situated in the orb of the percipient. If someone asks you, how do you say your zip code? Do you say your zip code, if you're, for instance, my zip code is 29150. I don't ever say my zip code is 29150. My zip code is 29150. Why? Right, I'm not remembering 5 numbers. The second way, I'm only remembering 2 numbers and 3 numbers. When I say 29150, I have to remember all 5 numbers. But when I say 29150, I remember 2 numbers and I remember 3 numbers. That's easier. My point is that we need to make things easier for the people that we're doing. Number 1 point, we need to make things fun for the people that we're working for and teaching. I was taking notes as these 2 guys went through. If you got absolutely nothing else out of anything that that Wayne said, and I wrote it down. I guess I'm a tactile learner. I write notes, quick notes. He said, "Do your homework." And there's no way you can be a successful teacher unless you do your homework. You've got to pretty much know more than the people that you're teaching. Not only should you know, but you should know different ways of presenting it, such as Mike said. That was the big thing I got out of what Mike said. Everything he said, I learned from Mike's presentation. I've got to have different ways to show things. That's essentially what he said. You've got to be able to have different ways of showing the same thing to different people, because different people learn different ways. What we need to reinforce is that in addition to showing these people how to do the call, because people don't come to square dance lessons to learn to square dance. We're trying to make square dancers out of them, and that's one of our problems. People don't come on Monday night to learn to square dance. They come to Monday night to get away from home for 2 hours. They come to get away from work or from bills. They come to have fun. They come to us instead of going to a movie. Now, we're messing up is because we're training these people to be like the dancers that we've created. We've created the choreographic nerds that Mike spoke of. And we're already taking these new people and we're putting them in that mode already. We're in a teaching mode. We're in class. You're students. You're in lessons. You're going to graduate. All of those terms tend to take away some of the fun. School, I don't know about you guys, school wasn't fun for me. In school, I did homework. I got detention hall. Got paddled. In school, I was in class. Had a specific time to be there. All of that connotation, and I think it's great that Wayne is saying, I don't use words like students anymore. And I don't use words like classes. These guys come on Monday nights and they're square dancing. They're having fun, and one of the neat things is that while they're having fun, one of the offshoots of that is they happen to learn some stuff. To me, that's what Wayne was saying the whole time. He says, I'm not trying to teach people to square dance. I'm giving them a little fun for an hour and a half on Tuesday nights. And in the course of that hour and a half, they learn 1 or 2 things. Wayne's way of having them learn 1 or 2 things in addition to having that fun is he is excellent at moving people around. One of the reasons he's excellent at moving people around is he's an excellent modular caller. Sight calling has almost killed us because we can't do the stuff that he was saying sight calling. When's the last time that you, in lessons or in your club, called some of that material? Boys circle half, pass through, and the girl, and then the heads turn and run. You can't cite that stuff. Maybe Mike Jacobs can cite that stuff. I surely cannot cite that stuff. Is that stuff good? It's great. It'd be great in classes. Not only would it be great in classes, it would be great in your club. It would be great at a Saturday night special. It would be great at the national convention at the 10 o'clock plus hour. That kind of stuff is good anywhere. Do we use it? No. Why? We sight call. We've gotten away from our modular calling. And modular calling is a powerful, powerful tool. We've gotten away from that because that's where years ago when square dancing was so good, most callers were modular callers. They did a routine, boom them over here, did a routine, move them over here, did a routine, put them back, Alaman left. And that's the way the dance went. we've gotten away from some of that, and we've become checker movers. We've started sight calling, so now we can say things like, okay, do the first part of this and the last part of that one, and everybody finish like this one, to a right and left grand. And we think we've done something great. Maybe, but we're calling to choreographic nerds. I like that. I've learned 2 things from you in a couple of weeks. I know that I'm a name dropper. Calling. We determined the way I call challenge is I call challenge by name dropping. Since I'm not a very accomplished challenge caller, I know how to do the calls. The only thing I can do is do the calls. I can't do anything with the calls. I can call them. I know where they start, where they end. I can call them. I see too many callers that are name droppers. Am I a good challenge caller? No. Why am I not a good challenge caller? I don't know how to work the program. Too many of us don't know how to work the program that we work the most. We don't do our homework. We don't study. We don't study our art. We cannot make a learning environment fun unless we know what we're doing. The material that Wayne was presenting was extremely technical. But it can be extremely fun. It's all in the presentation. Would he come up cold turkey to a group and say, heads turn through and run? I don't think so. I sure as heck wouldn't. But I think, now that I'm going to steal that. I'm going to steal the boys pass through and run once and a half and get me a line. I'm going to steal that. Well, I did it. So anyway, so then if it's come from too heavy, then it's no longer stealing; it's researched. Yeah. But I'm going to learn. I'm going to work on that. Am I going to go out Friday night when I go call somewhere and call that? No. I'm going to work on a way to present it. I've got to be able to present it to make it fun. Now, am I teaching run? Well, kind of. If I called that sequence to dancers that were already dancing mainstream, for instance, and I called that sequence, would I be teaching run? Of course I would. Without teaching it, because I'm showing it to them from a formation that they probably have never seen it from. I have to learn some helper words. I have to know where they're going to end up so that I can tell them where they're going to end up as they're doing the call. That's a good learning tool if they know where they're going to wind up. But I have to know that first. If I don't know my material, I sure can't tell them where they're going to wind up or tell them how they get there. I've seen callers explain calls, and I've seen experienced callers explain calls absolutely, totally, 100% wrong. At the National Convention, you were there this year. At the National Convention, we did a presentation, and we had a group about this size. And I said to the front row, tell me how you do spin the top. And the first 2 or 3 guys missed it. And prior to that, I asked how many guys call plus. Almost the entire floor raised their hand. I asked the front row how to do a mainstream call, and the first 2 or 3 callers missed it. Because they said, okay, you turn half by the right, then the center's turn. Once they say you turn half by the right, they've missed the call. You know, we're not going to get into the point. My point is that they didn't know how to do the call. If they tell me to spin the top is turn half right and the center's 3/4, that's not how you do the call. We cannot be creative unless we know the definitions and know how to do the calls. We need to know the definitions. Our client does not. Our job is to know how to do the call. Our job is to present it to our clients in such a manner that they learn it and they have fun learning it. If they're not having fun, I can tell you guys, they're not going to come back. If you wonder why in your area that there's a caller that you think is not nearly as technically as good as you are, and he has 10 squares on his Monday night dance and you have 5 on your Friday night dance consistently, and you're saying to yourself, this guy is not nearly as good a caller as I am. Why? The reason people are there is because they have fun. Doesn't matter how good he is. And I'm sure that everybody has an example of a caller in your area that we think is just really not really good, but he really has good crowds. And you find that if you go to his dance, you wind up having fun. I did something 2 weeks ago I hadn't done in, this is terrible, I haven't done it in probably 10 years. I met some new friends, and they said, Tony, why don't you come up to our club dance one night? They live 125 miles away. They dance on Tuesday nights. I call for a living. I call 275, 300 days a year. If I have a night off, normally the last thing in the world I want to do is go to a square dance. You know, I'd like to sit home and watch Chicago Hope or, you know, play basketball with my son or something. But I thought, you know, I hadn't done this in a while. So on a Tuesday night, I drive 125 miles and I go dance. And I've been calling longer than this caller. And I'm sure that I intimidated him when I came in the door, and he got very nervous. But I really had fun. You know, did he call technically a perfect dance? No. You know, I mean, he made mistakes. The man actually called a square through three and a right and left through. I danced it. He did a dive through, square through three, right and left through. Is that good? No, it's not good. It's not good hand action. I didn't notice anybody on the floor notice it. I did notice that he had a Tuesday night dance and we had about 10 squares. Now, I don't know how many of you guys dance 10 squares on Tuesday nights. He dances 10 squares pretty consistently on Tuesday nights. Something to ponder on. To me, I would much rather be known as when someone comes to my dance, when they leave my dance, I don't want them leaving the dance saying how good of a caller I am. I want them to leave saying how much fun I had. If they leave the dance saying I had fun, then I've been successful. The same approach we should use in a class atmosphere, in a teaching atmosphere. We want to come in, and when the dancers leave at the end of the evening, we want them to leave saying, wow, I really had a good time. We don't want them to leave saying, well, how many calls did you learn tonight? Man, it was great. I learned 17 calls tonight, and I now know how to do flip the widget, reverse, twice, once and a half. Well, now those are those choreographic nerds that we're gonna wind up keeping, and we're gonna run away our mass. We're only keeping the cream of the crop now. And it's because our style of teaching and our approach to lessons has been that way. We want to teach, and we want to continue teaching. We not only want to teach beginner lessons, we want to teach plus lessons. Then we want to teach advanced. These guys never get in an enjoyment atmosphere. We keep them in a teaching environment. If you're going to do that and you want to be successful, for those of you, and there are you guys that immediately upon graduation start teaching the next level, and immediately upon graduating that level, teach the next level. There's a bunch of us out there. If you're going to try to do that, if you want to be a little more successful, you better make it fun, because otherwise we're teaching the dancers for our benefit, not for theirs. And I see that too often now. We teach dancers in a manner so that we can call the way we want to, instead of worrying about the way in which they learn to make things easy for them. If it's not easy for them, we're not going to keep them. I stole a statement from, I forget who, I've stolen so much stuff over the years. But one of the things that I stole from somebody, and now I'm very fortunate. I do several caller schools during the year, and I put this in every syllabus that I've done. It talks about a teacher, and it says, the poor teacher tells, a good teacher explains, but a great teacher inspires. Too many of us only tell. Way, way too many. There's a smaller percentage of us that explain, but very, very, very few of us inspire. Those that do are the successful callers. You'll find they will not only be a successful caller, they have successful dancers. Dancers will now be able to not only dance to Wayne, but they could come and dance to me and enjoy it. One of the worst things I see as a caller, if your dancers can only dance to you, you're teaching them poorly. We should teach our dancers so that they can enjoy the activity, not just us. It's your job to figure out the best way to make that fun and make it entertaining for them. It amazes me how many of these topics, everything always comes back, at the bottom line, everything always comes back to presentation, in my mind. It doesn't come back to choreographic knowledge. It doesn't come back to definitions. It doesn't come back. To me, everything centers on presentation. It's not what we call or what we teach. It's how we teach it if we're going to be successful. We have to have multiple methods of teaching and calling. And we have to be able to make these things fun. One of the things I use in teaching, and I travel full time, so I do not get to teach beginners. However, I get to teach the people that you call to all year long. So I know, when I go to an area, I know which callers are doing a good job, which ones aren't, because I get to call to your dancers. If they can dance to me and I'm a wuss, if they have problems dancing to me, they got serious problems. One of the tools I use, though, if I'm teaching, and I teach people that already know how to dance, I don't teach new calls. I go back and teach calls they already know. I teach them how to do spin the top, since it's apparent that their caller never really showed them how to do spin the top, because he didn't know how to do it, because he said it was half right and left 3/4. I play with spend the time. I try to inject humor. One of my big points I try to inject is humor into it. If I can make the people laugh as they go, they're going to learn by osmosis. It's going to sink in. If they're having fun, if they're laughing and enjoying themselves, it's going to sink in. Even if only a little bit of it sinks in, I've accomplished my goal. I'm not trying to make perfect dancers, nor should you. That's impossible. Because I don't care how good if I were teaching my dancers, if he came in, because I've never thought to say heads turn through and run, if he called that, and even if I'm giving my dance, they'd have problems. Now, Wayne's job is to figure out a way to do that so that my dancers can do it and have fun at it. So that's what makes a good caller. A good caller is a caller that can teach people without teaching in a manner in which they don't feel like they're learning. They have fun doing it, and in the process, they actually do learn. You have to employ all of these techniques. You really have to have, you don't need to be as knowledgeable about the learning experience as Mike Jacobs. The learning president, I've heard his presentation on this before. It's awesome. It's very detailed. And I'll bet you $5 to a donut, there's people out there that said, he ain't never read them damn books. I'll bet you $100 that Mike Jacobs has read these books. Now, I'll also bet you $100 there's probably not 3 people in this room that are going to go out and buy these books. You're not going to buy either one. You're missing an excellent opportunity. If nothing else, I'd buy the one that says about teaching so kids can learn. That'd be the one I'd get because it's got pictures. And it's about 200 pages. It's got pictures, it's got cartoons. This was where I would start, and I was trying to write notes as Mike was going. I was really interested in the learning styles of calling, the auditory versus tactile versus visual, and what constitutes that, and how you think. I want to be able to apply that. My main point is, as I'm applying that, I want to apply it in such a manner that the people that I am showing enjoy it. With that in mind, can I do a quick square and just give you an example of what I'm talking about? If we're going to get a square up, I'll give you a very quick example. And I'm going to use an example that Wayne gave. Turn through and run, yeah. Okay, I'm going to use the call run. I'm not going to call heads turn through and run. But I like to use the call. Everybody says swing through, boys, run. Which way? Right, all the time. We very seldom say swing through, girls, run. And we very seldom say cross run. One of the biggest benefits I've had of being traveling is that I've been overseas. I've been to Europe and Japan and all of, and I listen to some of these European callers, and they've got some of the neatest material at basic and mainstream that I've never thought of. And I'm going to give you a sequence that at first glance I would say, that has got to be jerky, and I would never ever call it. And the sequence is swing. Let me say, let's have the head step in, face your corner. You guys are heads. Swing through. Boys to the left, cross run. Girls trade. I would have thought that would have been the jerkiest call in the world, because to me, boys should be running right. Here it is, boys are running left. That goes contrary to body flow, but it doesn't. It's perfect body flow. Girls trade. Girls to the right, cross run. Boys trade. Oh, everybody hinge. Boy run around the girl. Let me do it in a dance sequence for you. Everybody go forward and back, or for you Texans, go fart and back. Pass the ocean. Swing through. Boy, cross run to the left. Girl trade. Girl run. Bend the line. Now that just flows. That's just perfect flow. Now, let me show you something, and I don't teach cross run in a normal dance. If I was going to do a workshop environment, here's the way I would teach it, however. Pass the ocean. Now, number one, remember, I always try to make things fun. Everybody swing through. Now, here's a group of guys that I called cross run and they broke down. I'm going to show it to them real quick. So I say, okay, now listen, centers, if I were to ask you to run, boys, now which way would you go? To your? Absolutely, because you're a center dancer, and when you do a run, the center becomes the end of the formation. Now, boys, you're going to be running. Now, girls, you kind of get the run around, don't you? All right, my first thing, I'm trying to inject a little humor. So the boys would be the runners, girls, you would be the run-arounders or the runnies, I guess. My point, girls, is that you have to fill in his footprints. You've got to slide together and take his footprints. Boys to the right, run, just like always. Good. So centers become, if I call run, the centers run to the nearest end. Bend the line. past the ocean, swing through. Now, I haven't mixed up the sexes at all yet. So, boys, if I asked you to run, you would go to the nearest end, yes? So if I wanted you to cross-run, boys, it would make sense that you would go to the farthest end. So, and that's to your left, isn't it? Boys, be sure that you step forward first. Boys, cross-run to the left. Girls, you got to get out of the way. Now, what am I doing? I'm doing several learning techniques at one time. I'm giving a direction to go. I'm saying, boys, to your left. I'm also doing something a little more subtle. Notice that I didn't have the boys cross-run and the girls do nothing. I had the girls trade. I make a point that it's not part of the call. The reason I trade the girls is because they slide together and they're going to want to do something. 9 times out of 10, if you work with people enough, you find those people want to turn around. So I give them something to do. Okay? Girls trade. Now, girls, if I asked you to run, which way would you go? So if I wanted you to cross-run, what would you do? Absolutely. Boys, what do you got to do? Slide over. Good. Girls cross-run. Boys trade. Now, I've got a tool, but I'm not going to stop here because I've only used the centers. So I really haven't taught the call. They really haven't learned the call yet because I've only done it for the centers. So girls, if I were to ask you to run, where would you go? Boys, what would you do? Absolutely. Girls, you would run to the nearest center, wouldn't you? If I asked you to cross-run, girls, where would you go? Absolutely. Boys, what would you do? Boys, you got the same part. You got to get out of the way, don't you? You got to slide apart. Good. Girls, cross-run. Perfect. Boys, cross-run. Girls, you got to get out of the way. Good. Swing through. All right. With just that little bit, now I have enough that I can present this call a little bit. Everybody swing through again. Boy, cross-run. Girls, trade. Girls, cross-run. Boys, trade. Boys, run. Girls, cross-run. Boys, trade. Boys, cross-run. Girls, trade. Bend the line. Now, I'm doing a lot of overflow, and it's intentional. I want to be sure. I want to make them go to the right spot. But if you notice, now they've quit, but did you notice that they were smiling the whole time they did that? One of the reasons they were smiling, with the exception maybe of Lawrence, is that's not sequences that we typically use. There's very few dances that I go to that I hear the caller call cross-run from an ocean wave. I can count on my hand. When's the last time you called at your club dance, swing through and the boy cross-run? How many times have you heard somebody do that? I know what you did it, though. It's not fair. Yeah, we do Dixie style and the centers cross-run, okay? Start through for me. Veer left. There's people that say that's smooth and there's people that don't. Couple circulate. I care not because it doesn't matter. All right. Boys, if I asked you to cross-run, where would you go? Girls, what do you got to do? Boys, cross-run. Boys hinge, the girl face in, the boy extend. I now can call cross-run to these guys. Since I've done boys and girls, centers and ends, I pretty much don't need to worry about sex this time. I could mix the sexes up now if I wanted to, and I think they could do it. Everybody hinge. Girls trade. Girls cross-run to the left. Boys trade. Boy cross-run to the right. Girls trade. Everybody hinge. Centers trade. Swing through. Centers cross-run. Ends circulate. Centers cross-run. Centers trade. Boy run. See that these guys. Well, thank you. That's good. Thank you very much.
There's a bunch of other things to notice off of what Tony did too. There's several things in here. First off, there were lots of graphic words that gave pictures to the people on the floor. He talked about them sliding to the footprints. He talked about them sliding. That was the actual physical action. He said, get out of the way. It was another way of painting a picture that got them to go ahead and do something. It wasn't just a case of words coming out of his mouth. They were words designed to describe pictures. The second thing that he was doing audience participation. He forced them to play part of the atmosphere. He made them make noise responses back so that the atmosphere gave something to go on there. It wasn't just a pure sterile environment. So there was a lot more going on than just what Tony was talking about there. So all the different learning styles got appealed to, not just people that learn verbally.
Which was my point. You got one?
Yes. And also, on my side of did he know exactly where they were going every time he told them to move? There was no go over here and stop and let me see where you're at. He did his homework. He knew where they were going. He knew which hand was coming up. He knew which one they were going to trade with. He knew which direction they were going to go to and who's going to come in. You must know what you're doing.
It's just like a lawyer in a cross-examination period in a trial. You never ask a question you don't already know the answer to.
Yeah, I chose a call. You can bet that's a call that I've taught more times than I care to think about to dancers that already know. That's a routine that I've used on more than one occasion. I see your question. I'll get to you, Betsy. There was some overflow. People, sometimes we worry too much. There was some overflow there a couple times. That's cool. My point at that time was not to get the people dancing. It wasn't the dance as much as I was trying to get them to feel the call, to understand the call, to learn the call. I can worry about the choreography a little bit later. I wanted to teach the call, and I wanted them to have fun in doing it so that they'll learn it. People that see the call, when you take the time to show people a call in this type of manner, or have whatever, this type works for me. You may have to change it around. They'll keep that knowledge. Betsy. That's right. I had to record this mic. I'm sorry.
And this, Tony just illustrated one of the things that I have come to realize, that when I come home from a dance, my idea of whether or not that dance was successful was A, did I give them a good time, and B, did I in some way give them a variety which improved their dancing without them knowing it? Did I create some learning that they actually don't understand took place? Now, Tony took it to the workshop extreme, but I know he would do something that was more subtle if he didn't have to workshop the dance. And the whole idea is, people talk about, oh, these dancers can't do this, and they can't do this, and they can't do this, and they call it once, and then they never follow up on it, they never follow through, so they never give the dancers a chance to learn it at the club and still have fun as they're doing it.
As an example, if you use that cross run as an example in a class atmosphere, look at how much material you have now for the rest of your dance or your set of lessons. And it took you a little bit longer to show it than it would if you just said swing through, boys, run right. But now they have a better understanding. They can enjoy the call. Randy.
Yeah, I'm still working on the turn through heads run thing. If the heads were the last active people and you say heads run, would that not be a partner trade, or are you meaning them to run around the adjacent side people? Charles and I are still trying to figure it out back here.
That's like blind leading blind.
We'd have to pull out definitions and research into that. The point being that the actives run around the inactives, or the centers run around the outsides is where that goes. The heads are active, so they run around the inactives, while the inactives move forward and occupy their space.
But if you don't say that, if you just say heads turn through and the heads run, they are active, and the definition for run is around the adjacent dancer.
Yeah, okay.
But the adjacent dancer is beside them. What do you mean they won't do that?
No, we're getting into that.
That's like saying heads turn through and the heads walk and dodge.
I think, and I don't want to be critical of Wayne or Randy, this is where we've lost the whole point in square dancing. It is, obviously, if we want everybody to work, we'll say everybody. If we want only the centers to work, we say centers. Why do we retreat behind just little names to try to hide it and make it the game? The game should be in trying to let them experience flow, material, and thinking a little bit in the process. If we hide it and make it a cheap game, then that's why we lose people. And I think this is a cheap part of the game. I think that if we deliberately withhold information that can make them succeed, then where is the challenge of what's going on? It really, the game should allow people to win it, not us for constantly pull the carrot away just when they're about to grab it.
I say hourglasses. Any other questions? Up here in the front. This older gentleman.
Mike Turner. I was just fascinated by how Mike could recognize different people and their learning methods. And in an actual class situation where you recognize that someone is having a problem, other than trying all the different learning methods, how do you actually spot which type they are?
Well, I get to a dance half hour before the dance starts to set up and so forth. Well, people usually get there 15 minutes, 10 minutes ahead of time, but they talk, they interact with other people. You observed. All I did was observe everybody listening to Wayne. Part of it is observing while you're doing the teach initially of how they're reacting during the teach situation. But also watch how they interact on the outside, how they listen to people. They certainly talk. Other people will talk for a while or repeat something and see how they listen. You have to start observing. You have to start talking to people. Many times people betray their learning style by how they respond to you. They'll say things like, I see what you're saying, visual learner. I hear you, auditory. I feel that, you're tactile. You're going to find that they're going to betray themselves right away in how they deal with things. Those are little indicators of looking up left, looking up right, looking down. Many times what happens, you want to think of the auditory learner as the thinker, down like that, because the thinker has to shut out the outside world to concentrate on the auditory aspect. So there's lots of visual, physical clues that start to betray themselves. You don't need a whole biographical sketch, but after a while, all that information starts to fall into place. It means you need to observe. You don't need to observe everybody. There are successful learners out there. They're going to learn no matter what you do. It's like doing triage. Triage in MASH is that there's people that have scratches, you don't need to help them. There are people that will survive if you do help them, and there are people who won't survive no matter how much help you give them. So in this case, you need to analyze, the people that are going, the people you can help, you need to analyze. The people you don't have to help, don't bother. They've already won.
Okay, we got time for one more question.
Yeah, I have a question.
We got time. I'll get you, Milton. So we'll get two more.
I guess it's for Mike and maybe all of you, but years ago, a wise caller told me that you should have 3 ways of explaining something, which probably goes back to your different methods. But in the bottom line, you really learn by repetition, don't you? Would you comment on that?
I think we say that because we like to call that way. I'm not convinced that you learn any better doing something over and over and over again. I think you reinforce learning by repetition, but I don't think you necessarily learn by repetition. I think you reinforce it.
Depending on the type of learner, repetition is helpful or not helpful. For instance, if you have a person that's primarily auditory, then each place on the floor is a new experience. This recycle is different than the recycle when they were the end of the wave facing out or the end of the wave facing in. Now, as far as a conceptual learner is concerned, well, it's the same kind of recycle. Who cares which wall I'm facing? For someone that's basing things upon what wall they were looking at when they started, when they finished, then that recycle is different, and the recycle in the hall down the road is different from that one. My mother, for instance, is a great auditory learner, and she finally got into C1 dancing. Well, there are concepts at C1, and so you figure, okay, you learn one concept, you plug that in on the calls. Not for an auditory learner. That phantom recycle is different than a phantom also, and different than a phantom wheel and deal, and different than a phantom bend the line, and a phantom this and phantom that. She has 300 calls that begin with the word phantom. And the same thing goes down the line. So her vocabulary isn't the 200 calls that we got on the list all the way up to C1. Her vocabulary is like 3,000 calls. A lot with the same words. And it makes it really hard when you can't quite hear the call well, which is another parameter in teaching. So repetition is part of the teaching process, yes. And it's part of the learning process, yes, but not for everybody.
Okay. Well,
just real quickly, nice job on the panel. I enjoyed it. One point. For a long time, I have always thought that since the square dancing itself is by auditory commands, you have to induce those people to learn by auditory. And I understand what you said about the physical attraction and the visual learning aspects of that, Mike, but somewhere down the line, don't you have to make a transition with those people and get them into increase their auditory skills, or they're certainly going to be lost when it comes to the dance program itself?
I am a primary tactical learner and a secondary visual learner. I have hearing losses in both ears. I do things physically to help me get through calls, no matter what program I'm dancing. And so very little of what I've learned in square dancing has been auditory. If anything, if I don't have an environment in which to really learn it, it goes in one ear, out the other, literally. And so what I have to do is find ways to make the problem solve for me. So, a successful learner will find ways of doing that. You may have thought they were auditory for years, and they weren't. They've been faking it, just like I faked it. But I found ways of getting to that point. You know, I look and I go over here. I don't think about definitions at all. I've talked with challenge dancers that claim, oh, you can't possibly do this unless you do this. Wrong. I dance with them and then it's fine. Yet I'm not an auditory learner at all. Yes, our primary method of, if they're deaf, they're not going to be able to get my primary presentation. But just like Tony used all those words that pick graphic, tactile sensations, you know, you really did teach the tactile learner there. When you told me where to go and I found that spot and sorted it out, the visual aspect is pleased. So it isn't just a case that auditory is really the only way to learn square dancing. But we need to find ways to teach across the board.
All right, it's about lunchtime. Thank you for coming. Please enjoy the rest of your convention. Nice hand for the panel. Mike Jacobs, Wayne Morvent.